All right, we are going to. Kip asked me if I wanted to speak this weekend, and I haven't done it in a very long time. And I felt the Lord drawing my heart to speak this morning, and so I immediately was able to say yes to that gratefully. And a part of all of that is that this series has been so impactful for me. This Revelation series, and especially on the heels of the Cultural Chaos series that we did, and there was so much, I don't know how to say it, so many questions, so much conversation, so much mixing up, sifting through thoughts, feelings, theology, how do we deal with real life stuff and disagreements and discussions. There was so much of that in that series that was so healthy. I always believe that's healthy, is that, you stir it up and then you work out what is true and honestly just work together and be okay to disagree and figure out what we think God says the best we know how, and be united in our relationship in that. I love that. That's very healthy in my opinion. But then, this series to me has really been about, or what I have felt a sense of is a foundational settling of just looking at the glory of God. And that has been, and there's peace that comes in that. That is the main thing we're going to talk about today. And and I love what Jonathan did when he spoke a few weeks ago of being a part of the Revelation series, but not speaking on Revelation, but speaking on what the Lord has been saying to him through Revelation, like a response to Revelation. And that's what I'm speaking on this morning. And the point really is there is something powerful about living in his victory that comes alive when we see Jesus in his glory. There's something really powerful about that we get to be living in his victory. And there's something incredibly peace-bringing and empowering that comes when we're able to see Jesus in his glory as opposed to other ways. We'll get into that. But before we do, any Taylor Swift fans in the room? All right, there's two. There's the fewest number of Taylor Swift fans in any room in America, I think. Just two. Back when Taylor was starting this tour, we're on a first name basis. So, at least I am with her. Back when she was starting this tour, Liz and I got on our computers, and we had 4 different computers each, I think, or devices, trying to get tickets, refresh, getting in line to try to get, how many, was that last year? Yeah, so we had 2 12-year-old girls at the time then, and then a 18-year-old girl, and Liz, and Taylor Swift is a part of our household. There's more than one wall she's on in our house. And so we were refreshing, and we weren't able to get any tickets, because I think most people have heard at least about the story of all that situation. We weren't able to get tickets. But I immediately went on the reseller apps and found some tickets, but the closest one I could find was in Nashville. And it was before anybody knew what they had. So we got them cheap. But, so our girls, the 4 girls, got to go over to Nashville and see Taylor Swift. During this time, Luke and I were just hanging out at the house alone. And I decided that at night, he's a heavy sleeper, and so at night, when I couldn't sleep, which I regularly can't do when Liz is gone, that I was going to learn how to play the piano. I'd never done this before, and I am not known as a musical person either. We've had worship leaders who have to stand far apart from me where they can't hear me to be able to sing happy birthday, right? Or otherwise they'll get all mixed up. I'm not a musical person. I decided, I'm going to try to learn this. And I started with Taylor Swift songs to connect with my wife in all of that and my girls who were out having this fun trip. And there was something that happened in me of just focusing in on a song over and over and over again. And I didn't get sick of it, but it became too much a part of my life. And then, since then, Liz has regularly said, can you please stop humming that song? And I didn't even know there was a song in my head. It's just been a part of me. And I'll wake up with the weirdest songs. And then I'll just be in the shower or making breakfast, just humming, not even realizing it. But it's become a part of me. Recently, then, I decided, okay, I'm going to use a worship song to try to learn how to play the piano. And this happened at our last worship night that we had. There was a song, 2 songs in particular, that struck me. And so I have been trying to learn that and just be having that soak into my life. And it's actually the one that that Danielle has said is the one we're singing coming out of the sermon today, which is Make Room. And that song encapsulates really what's been happening in me over this last year. This year, or this Easter, we're coming up to about a year on the most spiritually intense couple weeks of my life. And when I was in high school, I played football and I got injured a few times. I've always lived pretty hard, so I went for it. I got injured a couple times. I went to the chiropractor, and they did some scan on my back and said that this nerve is dead. And so I always have to go to the chiropractor to get whatever that's connected to put back into place. I don't understand it all enough, but I know I'm in pain all the time in my back. Then we had that snowstorm last year, and we were sledding. Me and the kids were sledding, and Luke and I were going tandem. I made him, and made him uncomfortable, and it was very funny. And we went down this hill in our front yard, and the snow plow had just been by, so there was a big gap, of level. And so we went flying off, and then bam, just crashed down right on my tailbone. Didn't break my tailbone, but it put everything in the wrong place. And if you've ever had your hips out, it is incredibly painful to do anything. And so, walking is hard and everything. So, that was going on. And so I was dealing with that. I had been given this very important task at the church. And it had taken over. I had been asked to get rid of all my other responsibilities and focus on this for a short time, and for about 6 weeks. And so I was right in the middle of that. Easter was the deadline. I was coming up to that deadline. And then I had Tuesday night, I think it was Tuesday night. I had Tuesday night laid out as a time that I would focus all night. So basically it's a all-day work day for me, was Tuesdays, those days. And that whole night, and I was going to be working on this project, and I was relying on that time to be able to meet this Sunday morning deadline. And then I realized that we have a worship night happening, and I need to be there, and I was angry. I was mad that I had to go to worship night. And we come in, I had a terrible attitude, and I was under incredible stress. I was in pain, which, just the grinding irritation of constant pain. I was in that. I was in all those things. I was sitting over here, and then Kip invited us. Thank you so much. You can hear that thing I was talking about. Okay, so here's all my thoughts. Which one? Where was I? There it is. Okay, came in here. Kip invited us to all move to different places of the room, and just be praying. So I was sitting there. I was over here. I felt like, God, what's going on? Where should I be? Over here. It was this whole thing. I'm not going to tell the whole story. I ended up back there. And during the course of this week, there were 3 different women who I have incredible respect for, who came to me and told me something that I just knew was the word of the Lord for me to share with me at that moment. And so that night, it was Sherry Harris that came over, and it was a very simple thing. Put her hand on my back while I was sitting there trying to pray, and shared this word with me. And then another time it was Marie Jensen while I was sitting right over there. I don't remember if it was that night or the Good Friday service. It was right there, and Marie came over. And then the meeting I had afterwards, Jane Vandervelde shared the third one with me out on our way out. And when I was sitting there, I just said, Lord, I'm not happy. I'm so frustrated. I'm tired of being frustrated. And I'm tired, this was a process, but I'm tired of trying to be something, trying to create something, trying to solve something, trying to live up to something. And there's lots of, don't assume anything there. There's lots of expressions for that for everybody. I'm just tired of it. And there's so much reliant on me, and I'm exhausted. And not I can't do it, none of that. It's just because of it, I'm unhappy. And then I felt, and the Lord did something in me. And he helped me realize that it's not me that builds the church. It's not me that provides safety for my family. It's not me that, whatever it is, creates life change. It's not me that does that. It's him. And that he's not asking me to create certain results. He's just asking me to be faithful in what he's calling me to. And that was, it feels so simple, but it was life-changing for me. And I was sitting there, back in that spot, in the back of the room, pouting, which then turned to pouring my heart out to the Lord. And I was sitting there, and I just gave up. I said, okay, Lord, I'll only do what you're asking me to do, and let you do what you will with it. I'll trust you with the results. I'll just be faithful in what you're calling me to. And I'm going to work my butt off with it, but I'm going to just be faithful with it. Not to create results, but to be faithful and live in worship of what you're calling me, worship of you. And I was sitting there, and as I was sitting there, my heart would race if I had an idea of doing something. I saw that something was happening in the meeting that was going to get us off track. And so instead of going and handling that, I just trusted the Holy Spirit to do what he will with it. And normally I would go take care of it. But I realized, Kip can handle it. Lord, you can handle it. And you don't need me. It's not about me. I'll just sit here. And I just sat there. And if I even tried to move my arm, my heart would start just... It was an unbelievable experience. Then, I think it was Danielle, shared that there was a word of healing for something. And I was sitting right over here at this point. This is when Marie was over here. And Marie telling me that everything that's happening here is for me. Not that it's just for me, but all of it that's happening is also for me. And I have this picture of things, but I saw a spot of pain on my body, and that the Lord was healing it, which was my whole hip thing. And then I felt like God was saying, pray it up your back. And so I prayed it up my back. And so there was something I needed to do in that. I wasn't creating healing. I was just being faithful in what he called me to pray it up my back. And I couldn't, but I could almost feel my bones moving, straightening out. And I just knew that I was healed. And in that position, I wouldn't know, but I just knew it. And then, it'd been a couple weeks, and I went to the chiropractor, and he said, oh man, Jeff, you've got great leg balance, and like surprise. And what's going on? And it'd been a couple weeks. He was out of town, whatever, and I'd been multiple times a week. And he said, you don't need any correction. I said, and I had been telling him about all these other things that God was doing with the whole me staying in my lane and letting him be him and just be faithful with what I'm doing, all this stuff. Like, that was life-changing for me. To just be free to be faithful and let him do what he's going to do with it. That was life-changing. I was so excited about that. I had peace. I had vision. I had excitement. I was able to just be me and not have to create something or be something. Just be faithful in it. Be faithful with my wife, faithful with my kids, faithful with the Lord, faithful with my job, and just let God do what he's going to do with it. It was unbelievably freeing. So I'd been telling him about this. This is Tim. I talk with him a lot about my life. And so I was doing that. And then I said, oh, that's right. God healed me. I forgot. I forgot. Because for the last couple of weeks, I'd been walking around it's been a year now. I've been to him once just because I had a lack of faith. He said, yep, you still don't need any adjustments. So I haven't been to him since. After going multiple times, my back was healed. But what was cool about that, or cool's the wrong word. I'm just going to go with it though. What was cool about that, what was really so powerful about that, was it was a physical representation of the spiritual reality that was happening in my life at that moment. At the moment that I was being released from carrying the weight of so many different things, which was all internal on me, by the way. It wasn't anybody else doing anything. It was how I was taking things. And whatever. So it was all about me. And in that moment, as I was releasing that and letting God take the weight of all that, no circumstances changed. It was just my trust in him and my focus on being faithful, but then reliance on hearing him on what to be faithful in. It's a whole thing. But as I was doing that, my back was healed, which I usually hurt from carrying weight, right? We do a lot of construction at our houses, so until we sell them and then move on. So that's what's happened in me about a year ago. And then we went into this series. There's all kinds of other things. That's the summation. But that's what is this part of the story that's needed today. I also haven't needed glasses or contacts for the last year. That's a whole different part of the story. There has been unbelievable, and that was all a physical representation of something spiritually that was happening with me, being able to see the world through God's eyes, not mine. There was all kinds of things that the Holy Spirit did in my life this last year that was earth-shattering for me. Absolutely changed my whole world, and I am a different person. And it's when we came back this last summer from a trip we had, people asked, what is it that God did? And the thing I could say is, I have a peace. There's just a peace I have. No circumstances have changed, but I'm not stressed out. There's stress, but I'm not stressed out. And I have a peace. And yet I knew coming into just getting back into the fall and regular life that I would have to fight for that peace to continue. I would have to fight for me to be able to continue to stay in the relationship with the Lord that I needed to be able to receive that peace. Nothing different about God, different about my ability to fight for staying in that relationship. So that was this last year. I've been good and bad about fighting for that. Then we get into the Revelation series. And what struck me most about this series was at the very beginning, and it was from Revelation 1, I think. Let's read it together. When I turned to see, is it Revelation 1? Yeah, 1, 12 through 18. When I turned to see who was speaking to me, I saw 7 gold lampstands, and standing in the middle of the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man, Jesus. He was wearing a long robe with a gold sash across his chest. His head and his hair were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were like flames of fire. His feet were like polished bronze refined in a furnace, and his voice thundered like mighty ocean waves. He held 7 stars in his right hand, and a sharp 2-edged sword came out of his mouth, and his face was like the sun in all of its brilliance. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as if I were dead. But he laid his right hand on me and said, "Don't be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I died, but look, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and the grave." This is a different picture of Jesus than I normally walk through life with. And I love different ideas of Jesus. One of my favorite verses is Jesus wept, because that whole idea of he was going to meet these people who were mourning for Lazarus. He knew Lazarus was about to rise from the dead, and yet he went in and saw their pain that was about to be celebration in moments. It was going to be celebration. But instead of just being like, hold on, trust God, what's going to happen? Instead of being like that, which would be my normal response, instead of that, he wept. He cared so deeply about them. That he cared about something I undervalue a lot, and he cared about their feelings. He cared about something they were going through. That changes my perspective of Jesus and convicts me of certain attitudes as well. That is a big one for me. Another one is we look at Jesus as, we tend to, I'm generalizing here, but we tend to look at Jesus as kind of a weak, like a strength under control, true meek, strength under control. But he's all about love, and which a lot of people can look at on the weak side, which is really a misunderstanding of love, but it can tend to look that way. And he was killed, and there's a lot of things that people have this idea of Jesus with. And yet, then there's the verse where he goes into the temple, and most people know that he went into the temple, he saw what was happening there that was wrong, and he cleared out the temple. So, some people know he came in with a whip and was driving people out of the temple. But what's impactful to me about all of that is he didn't have Indiana Jones as his tour guide there. He didn't just have a whip ready to go. He got the materials for a whip, and it said he sat down and braided a whip. This wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction. He sat down and thought about this. He was calculated in it. And how horrifying that somebody would see what you're doing, somebody who was as respected as Jesus would come in, see what you're doing, and then sit down and braid a whip in front of you while you're sitting there continuing to just do it. I love that picture of Jesus. And it blows out some of the ideas I have about him and makes me look at him in a different way, which then makes me respond to him in a different way. This picture of Jesus, seeing him in his glory, has been so impactful for me over these last few months. I think this was November, December, that Kip was teaching on this part. And realizing that Jesus is in his glory, and he has accomplished victory. And then we now get to live in that victory. No matter what happens to us here, no matter what we're going through, no matter what the circumstances are, we're in his victory. And therefore, there might be horrible things that happen to us, but we can still have peace because we know he's had ultimate victory. But that takes an eternal mindset. That takes realizing that what happens to me in this life is not about me. And yes, Jesus cares. Jesus wept. He cares, and yet my life is lived for him, and my life is lived for eternity. That one day, this life, the Bible says this, that this life will be like a dream, like the morning fog that burns away. And so therefore, when I did go through cancer and chemo and all that, and I'm good now, and just for all those questions, I'm good now, no cancer. But when I was going through that, I never went to God and said, God, why me? And it's okay if people do. I totally understand that. Totally. I completely understand that. But that wasn't my response. Because why not me? I know how broken I am, and it's not God doing it to me. I know that. Even if it was, I trust that he has a good reason for it, that he's God, I'm not. How can I think I know better than him? Like, that's been so ingrained in me from youth that why not? And I'll deal with whatever you bring at me, Lord. I'll do my best at it. And yes, I might crumble under the pressure of it if I'm trying to create solutions myself without relying on you. It has to be about you. 2 other scriptures came to mind as I was going through this process. One is 1 Samuel 3, 1 through 11. Let's not read let's go ahead and read it. I'll take that time, long to explain it anyway. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel served the Lord by assisting Eli. Eli was the head priest, and Samuel was a child that was given to serve the Lord for his entire life by his parents. Now, in those days, messages from the Lord were very rare, and visions were quite uncommon, meaning they would have been thirsty for the Lord's voice. One night, Eli, who was almost blind by now, had gone to bed. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the tabernacle near the ark of God. Suddenly, the Lord called out, "Samuel!" "Yes," Samuel replied. "What is it?" He got up and ran to Eli. They didn't even have a mindset of this is God, because it was so rare at that point. "Here I am. Did you call me?" Now, I picture Eli's response. Have you ever been woken up by a kid in the middle of the night? Right? Especially if you're almost blind, can't see exactly what's happening, and they're all, thinking you're awake, not being careful. Kaylee used to come in and just smack us. I'd wake up to being slapped, and it was a miracle she didn't get it back, just in my sleep, Does that sound right? Do you know what I mean? Okay. I'm not going to hit my kid. That's never been an issue. All right. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, Eli replied. Go back to bed. So he did. Then the Lord called out again, Samuel. Again, Samuel got up and went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, my son. Eli said, go back to bed. Probably more irritated this time. As he went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and hover. No, back. That's the next one. God, I went to Eli. Here I am. Did you call me? I didn't call you, my son. Go back to bed. Samuel did not know that the Lord, because he had never had a message from the Lord before. So the Lord called a third time. He didn't know his voice, is what that means. Lord called a third time. One more, Samuel got up, went to Eli, and said, here I am, did you call me? Then Eli realized it was the Lord who was calling the boy. And so he said to Samuel, go and lie down again, and if someone calls again, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. So Samuel went back to bed. As the Lord came, and called as before, Samuel, Samuel, twice that time. And Samuel replied, speak, your servant is listening. And then the Lord said to Samuel, it's the whole thing. And then it goes on to say the Lord would speak to him regularly there. Went on, got messages regularly in his life. This is the life I want. There's so much in that one statement of speak, Lord, your servant is listening. First of all, it takes a relationship where you have to be able to acknowledge his voice. He didn't know. He had to have some older guy say, dude, it's God. I probably would have just told the kids that anyway if they were waking me up. Why don't you just pray next time? But it was true that he said, it's God. Talk to him. Oh, okay. So he had to learn the Lord's voice. Then he had to have the attitude of, your servant is listening. He said, not, God, tell me some great word. Let me be a great person. Let me do. Not go to him and say, I need this. But to go to him and say, I'm your servant, with that heart, that attitude of saying, I'm your servant, I'm listening. What do you want from me? Because it's really all about you. I was meeting with a guy a while ago. I don't know why I said this last week. I was meeting with a guy a while ago who was saying, and this is a common theme I get a lot, is saying, do you think the Lord would bless this? I'm going to God asking him for this, but it's not happening. Why is the Lord not blessing this? One of my kids recently had the same kind of question, and saying, we sat down, we were having a conversation, and they were saying, I keep asking for this. What is God's attitude towards it? Do you think this is something he would like, would bless? And we had to have a conversation of how much of your prayer life is listening? How much of your prayer life is asking questions that require a response and actually expecting a response from the Lord? And keep doing that when you don't understand God's voice to learn what the voice is. Say, oh, that was God's voice. I did this as a young man, and I would walk by the stack of books. I remember it. And one time this book jumped out at me, and I looked at it. I've used this before, but I looked at the book. I was like, oh, that must be your voice, Lord, because I felt like, oh, I need to go look at that book. I looked at the book. I opened it up, nothing. I just felt dull while holding this book and looking at it. And then I realized, oh, it's just a red book, and a bunch of black ones are around it. Like, it just stuck out. That wasn't the Lord's voice. But then I kept going. I didn't get frustrated and say, oh, I can't hear the Lord's voice. I kept going because I need to hear the Lord's voice. And so I kept going and going and going, and was able to hone in on when it's God speaking and when it's not. It's okay to be wrong. What matters is that we're trying. We're seeking him. It's a relationship that we're working on with him. But how much of your prayer life is actually spent asking questions and listening to his response? How much is asking God, what's your will, Lord? It's not about what I can get from you, not treating God like a genie, but it's saying, Lord, what's your will? How can I be a part of that? Then, the last section of scripture here is somebody that has been a model of life for me since I was in middle school. Whenever Moses went out to the tent of meeting, not Moses, by the way, but whenever Moses went out to the tent of meeting, all the people would get up and stand at the entrances of their own tents. Anybody could go to the tent of meeting and go talk to God. But when Moses would go, they would all get up, stand at the entrance of their tents. This is when the Israelites were in the desert. They would all watch Moses until he disappeared inside. As he went into the tent, the pillar of cloud would come down and hover at its entrance while the Lord spoke with Moses. When the people saw the cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, they would stand and bow in front of their own tents. Oh, the pillar was God's presence. Would come down. God's presence would be in the tent with Moses. So in the tent, they would stand and bow down in front of their own tents. Inside the tent of meeting, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Now that's the relationship I want to have. The Lord spoke to Moses as one speaks to a friend. Afterward, Moses would return to the camp, but the young man who assisted him, Joshua, son of Nun, this is the simple verse that is so key to me. Joshua would stay behind in the tent of meeting. Joshua was Moses' assistant. He went and helped him everywhere. There's only 2 references of Joshua that I'm aware of before this reference. And they are a battle that he was a part of and then going up on the mountain with Moses. And then there's this, that Joshua stayed, and Joshua became a great leader. He was one of the 2 that went into the promised land and reported that we can do this. We can trust God. Let's go, people. They were so much so they were going to stone him. And then he led the people into the promised land after Moses had died. He was a great leader. Being able to accomplish things that the greatest leader of all time could not accomplish. Moses is typically known as that. In partnership with the Lord, of course. But the key to this is he would remain behind in the tent of meeting. And why? Because he wanted his own relationship with the Lord. He didn't want to just sit around and watch someone have a relationship with God. He was owning it for himself. He wanted that. He wanted to be able to talk with the Lord as if to a friend, He wanted to be able to know the Lord's voice. And it turned out that he was able to trust the Lord more than anybody else was able to at that point, because he knew what God was saying. Now, what's the point of all this? The point of all this is when Jesus died and was raised from the dead, he, in forgiving us, the veil was torn in two. The Spirit of God was released to all of us. And we have the opportunity to interact with him as Moses did, as with a friend. As the same experience that Joshua so hungered for. The thing that made Samuel a great, great man. The ability to interact with him, to hear the Lord's voice, and to say, yes, Lord, your servant is listening. We have that because Jesus has already accomplished the victory. Jesus is in heaven, in his glory. And his presence is alive with us, available to us at any moment. No matter who you are, what you've done. Because it's not about you. Let's have the band come back up while we finish out here. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's simply about him. Christianity is the one belief system, the one religion where it's not what you have to do, it's what's been done for you. Why? Because we can't be equal to God. He has to close that gap for us. What has changed my life this last year, and what revelation has really come alive in with me, is the glory, the greatness of God, his love, and the peace that I can have in that. I have to fight for it, yeah. I have to fight for this imperfect person to be able to experience it. To be able to see through all the filters I've put on God. To be able to see through all the circumstances of life and be able to just see him. To have the humility to say, Lord, your servant's listening. What do you want? Not, Lord, bless what I'm doing, but God, is what I'm doing your will? What is your will? Because I want to be about that. We went to a book release that my dad, Pastor Kip, referenced this a couple weeks ago, I think. But there was a book release where their experiences with Roy were written about in it. I'm written about in it too. He didn't mention. It says, and I brought Jeff in the car. I'm written about in this book. First book I've been written about in. And we went to this book release, and there were these people that were just, there was, at the end, after all the planned stuff, Ray was over there, and Mom and Dad were here, and Cindy, and they were just talking about the community they had there, about the heart they had, that there was an expectation that Jesus was coming back soon. There was, at any moment he could be here. There was a sense, he said Ron was known for, I think it was loving people, but Roy was known for the kingdom, for eternity. And there was a sense of living for eternity, of having your life mean something. That doesn't mean everybody needs to be a missionary or a pastor. That means that we all have the opportunity, should is the wrong word, we all have the opportunity to live life knowing what his will is and being able to be aligned with that, empowered for it, and not have to try to be something anymore. To not have to be responsible for the outcomes, but faithful in the actions, faithful in the heart. Oh, the lightness of life with the mix of being power involved in it. So amazing. And that is my prayer for us this morning. Let's take communion together. Let's start by taking the bread. His body broken for our wholeness. Don't let this mean broken for your perfection. Any of the life change that happens in me, none of it was about me being a better person or me learning something, me getting rid of some sin, me getting rid of some temptation, me handling it better. There was nothing about that. It was all what he's done and I get to be a part of. And I get to fight to stay in. Not fight to be, but fight to stay in his presence. His body is broken for your wholeness so that you can be free to be what he's called you to be. Jesus, thank you. Thank you for that incredible gift. And we eat this bread in your name, Jesus. And when we take this juice, which is his blood poured out for our forgiveness, for the cleansing of our sin. And all we have to do is receive. He was perfect. Revelation later talks about the Lamb. I'm not going to go into all that. He was perfect. The perfect sacrifice. Sin offering for all of our sin of all time. There's only one way to have that happen, was have there be perfection so that we could be then therefore perfectly forgiven. He was the only one that could. And he chose to give up his rights as God to come to earth, to live that life of being that perfect Lamb of God for you and for me. Anything I do now is not to be perfect. It is out of appreciation for him making me perfect in his eyes. Thank you, Jesus. Speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. And we drink this, receiving the gift that you have brought. Lord, let us live in your victory, no longer being drugged down by defeat. Because even what feels like defeat will ultimately be turned to victory in you. Let us live in that now. And you have offered that. We drink this to receive that, acknowledge it, and say, thank you, Jesus. We love you too. Let's drink this together. This song that we're about to sing, I will make room for you to do whatever you want to. Let's sing that and actually mean those words. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to.